Thanks for tuning in to the Urban Scope podcast with more college football news. It might be the off season right now, but news is still buzzing. According to USA Today, they reported that the NCAA is considering expanding the college football playoffs to 16 teams, which, if you go back to the days of the BCS era, there were only two teams and there was no playoff system. You would just finish your season, and the two best teams that they would pick in the BCS rankings would go against each other in the championship, usually the first or second week in January, and that was that. But recently, over the last couple of years, they expanded it to four, and then last year they expanded it to 12. So there's a lot of dilution, I believe, that will come with this expansion from the college football playoffs. When you think about um, the sacredness of the game of what it used to be. When you expand anything, especially tournaments and things like that, you kind of raise the stakes lower for those teams. So teams don't, they go into the mindset of, I can lose two or three games and still have the possibility to win a national championship. And it kind of takes away from the game. And NIL doesn't help either because of the money factor. A lot of players were playing their best to get to where they needed to go because they were hungrier. When you think about players who might have been on the fence as far as being drafted or not, that money up front kind of dissolves them of that accountability to play better. So if I know that I come from nothing and I'm a freshman and you give me $5 million to play for your team, what's the rush of me? What's the incentive for me really playing better? I know there's more money at stakes, but the chances of making the league are very slim. But if I'm making the money right now, you know, I have something to fall back on in the long run to a degree. But when you think about this expansion, um, USA reported that they believe this move is about revenue because the money that they're losing from NIL and other things. So the more games, the more revenue. But to a degree, that might not be true because if you expand this playoffs, you have to think about the health of these players. So a lot of players, especially the draft hopefuls, the ones that's going in the first 3, 4 rounds, probably first two rounds, probably specifically, they sit out these games because they don't want to injure themselves and risk the big payday coming up in the future. So if you're expanding the playoffs and I have to play an additional, one or two games, there's a good chance that I might not play one of these games or I might not play my best effort because I'm thinking about the long run. I can't mess up the bag right now, for the rest of my life when I have the rest of my life to, put the performance on hand. When you get to the playoffs, scouts have pretty much already saw what they've seen. They already know what kind of player you are. They know where you should be drafted. The projections are the projections. And these teams and scouts already seen you play 3 years before, 2 or 3 years before. So they already have enough tape on you, and you really don't need a game or two to decide that. So with the expansion, the possible expansion of this college football playoff system, it could be detrimental for not only the players, but for the league as well with the dilution of so many teams, um, not having the stakes high. Because like I said, back in the BCS era, you can only lose one game at the most. If you lose two, you were out. If you lose one, you still had hope, but it was kind of slim. But if you were undefeated, you're definitely for sure what's in that running. It didn't necessarily guarantee it because, the strength of schedule and all of these different factors, how many points you lose or how many points you win to this team on this field and this field. It's a lot of different variables, but at least you can control your own destiny with only one or less losses. But now you can go into it and say, man, I can lose at least two or three games, especially if you're in the SEC. I can lose two or three games with my strength of schedule and still possibly make the national championship game. I might have to play an extra game or two, but at the end of the day, I still have that opportunity opposed to, like I said, the BCS era when you didn't have that opportunity. Um, but, I think for the fans, we would enjoy more games because we have um, more content. We have more entertainment to look at. We have more time to see the players we love and the teams we love. But at the same time, at what cost is that going to cost us? Because if we lose our favorite player who's a freshman to some kind of traumatic injury, he could be out for the whole next season and we'll have to sit out and, possibly wait a year and a half to 2 years to see that player play again, just because of the wear and tear of the season. Players are used to playing 13, 14 games. Now you're talking about possibly 15, 16, 17 games that a team might have to play. It's a lot of wear and tear. And if you play for a team that is not winning by this in traumatic fashion, winning by a lot of points, you're going to be expending more minutes, especially in those teams in the SEC. You're going to have a lot of games where it's a lot of close games, a lot of games where you're playing 4 quarters, opposed to, playing in some conference where you're only playing a half a lot of the time and things like that. So it's going to get very interesting with this expansion. And I think, it's going to be some pushback about it. But as far as the NCAA has a lot of power, so I don't think there can be too much that players could do, especially when they're getting the NIL money and all these endorsements. The league is trying to get their lick back and trying to get their money back from a revenue perspective, because all those years of just, making all this profit off these players are starting to get, their just due as far as revenue goes. But like I said, it's always at what cost, right? So if the NCAA folds, where will these players go? I don't think the NCAA will fold. I think they will figure out some way to make revenue off the players' NILs deal, whether they get some kind of percentage from the colleges, but they'll figure it out eventually. But this plan, I don't think, is a good issue as far as the health and safety of the players going forward. And it seems like they have an issue similar to the NBA right now. The love of the game is kind of diminishing because of the benefits that the players are receiving and the leverage that they have. I'm all for player leverage, but at the end of the day, sometimes we need a little balance to offset some of that strength that one side has, whether it's the players and the owners or the players of the league. There has to be a balance. And right now, the scales are tilting more to players, and it's kind of affecting the fans' enjoyment for the game. So tell me what you think about the possible college football expansion. And then until next time, I'll see you next time.